World War II is arguably the largest and deadliest armed conflict in the history of mankind. The war encircled the globe, forcing nearly every country on Earth to align with one of two massive military alliances. The Axis power included Germany, Italy, and Japan, while the key members of the Allies were the Soviet Union, Britain, the United States, France, and China. The most up-to-date estimates calculate that around 85 million people died in World War II. That estimate equates to roughly 4% of Earth's population at the time. It is not a surprise that more than two-thirds of the deaths were civilians. It is estimated that around 30 million civilian deaths happened due to military or war crimes, while around 25 million died due to war-related famine or diseases. Why the world experienced such catastrophe, who is responsible for that destruction, and what we could have done to avoid it, are beyond the scope of our discussion. Please keep in mind that the purpose of this video is not to downgrade the heroic efforts made by various countries and their leaders to protect the world from Nazism. You may have heard so many things about leaders who led their countries at the time of World War II. Those leaders will always be remembered for their bravery, since we are all here, alive, because of them. I would like to mention that we do not promote any political ideology in our channel. Our only goal is to make you smart, intelligent, and pragmatic. We only provide you with some information and ask you to be rational and pragmatic about everything you heard and are hearing. If you are ready to know things that you've never heard about World War II, this video is for you. The Ghost Train. World War II was a time of great suffering and destruction for almost the entire world. Like any other war, during World War II, some of the most valuable artifacts and treasures were either ruined or went missing. While some of them have been recovered later on, there are still countless antiquities that remain unfound. Towards the end of the war, when the Russian Red Army was marching to Wrocław, Poland, a train was supposedly sent out of the city. That was not an ordinary train. The train was thought to be transporting the gold reserves from the Wrocław Bank that had been captured by the Germans. The locomotive, last seen in May 1945, is believed to be loaded with some 300 tons of gold, which would be worth more than $10 billion today. Many suspect the train may be hidden in a mountain tunnel, often utilized by German military leaders at the time. Nothing has ever been found. 300 tons of gold, and an unknown number of pieces of jewelry, gems, and artifacts were gone. Possibly forever. The Red Army. Nazis' death warrant. In the year 1941, over 3 million German troops invaded Russia, in 3 parallel offensives, in what is the most powerful invasion force in history. Widely known as Operation Barbarossa, caused immense damage to the Russians, and subsequently to the Germans. Against Russia, Germans allotted over 180 divisions, which include 30 divisions of Finnish and Romanian troops. Take these numbers into perspective, and you will realize how deeply involved the Soviets were in the war. Entire armies from the British, the US, and other allies were fighting against 10 German divisions, while the Soviets alone were confronting around 180 divisions. The Soviet Union suffered the highest number of World War II casualties. As many as 27 million Soviets lost their lives, which includes around 11 million military deaths, and 10 million civilian deaths due to military activity, and an additional 6 million deaths due to famine and disease. Importantly, those totals do not include Over 14 million Soviet soldiers wounded during the war. Needless to say that among the Soviet Union's 15 republics, Russia withstood the highest number of deaths and casualties. Although every single life matters, compared to the around 1.5 million total deaths encountered by the US, UK, and France collectively, someone may argue that the real battle has happened between the Soviet Union and the Axis powers. In the end, 8 out of 10 German soldiers who died on the battlefield died on the Russian front. It was largely the Russian military that steamrolled the once invincible German army. If you like anecdotes, you may like this. During World War II, Germans captured Soviet Union leader, Joseph Stalin's son, Yakov, and sent him to a concentration camp. When Hitler came to know about the capture of Yakov, he made an offer to Stalin to exchange his German field marshal, Friedrich Paulus, one of the top German military officers, for Stalin's son Yakov. Stalin's answer was simple and firm. I don't trade soldiers with marshals. According to the British historian Nikolai Tolstoy, there was another proposal as well. After Stalin rejected his earlier offer, Hitler expressed his willingness to exchange Stalin's son Yakov for Hitler's nephew Leo Raubal. To Hitler's sadness, the second proposal was also not accepted by Stalin. Stalin is believed to have said that, all Soviet prisoners of war are my sons, so I can't swap one. Yakov ultimately died at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp in 1943. Love him or hate him, Stalin and his Soviet Union's contributions and sacrifices to protect the world from Nazism should not be forgotten. Operation Unthinkable. If you thought the Cold War between East and West reached its peak in the 1950s and 1960s, then think again. 1945 was the year when Europe was the crucible for a Third World War. With the dust still settling after the end of World War II in Europe, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill set his sights on World War III. To invade the Soviet Union. Unofficially named Unthinkable by Britain's General Staff. The plan called for American, British, and Polish troops as well as soldiers from the newly defeated Germans to completely surprise the Soviets from the Baltic to the Mediterranean. Interestingly, when Prime Minister Churchill was planning to launch a surprise attack on Russia, his wife Mrs. Clementine Churchill was in Russia, visiting and meeting Russian cities and leaders for thanking them for their contribution to defeating Nazi Germans as the chairman of the Russian Fund, which was formed to support Russia and set out to help their allies across the continent. Whether she was aware of Churchill's plan to invade Russia at that time is not known, but her genuine concerns about the Russian losses are undeniable. There are lots of contradictory reports about the Operation Unthinkable. With the benefit of hindsight, some political analysts argued that Churchill's calculations to invade Russia in 1945 were correct, which would have stopped the spreading of communism and the Cold War. On the contrary, some argue that it was a conspiracy against one of the Allies, who sacrificed approximately 15% of their entire population to defeat the Nazis. Do you think what Churchill was planning to do was the right move? Please share your viewpoint in the comments section. Why did so many Chinese die in World War II? When looking back at World War II, the United Kingdom spotlights the Battle of Britain and El Alamein as tipping points in their victory, while for the Russians it's Stalingrad and Kursk. Americans proudly celebrate D-Day and the Battle of Midway. However, the contribution of China, whose war was the longest and among the bloodiest, tends to be forgotten in the West, and even by the Chinese to some extent. The scale of China's involvement in World War II was massive. China as a whole lost an estimated 20 million people in the war, with only the Soviets' death toll being higher. If China folded, Japan's military capability should have been vastly amplified. China was indeed the Great Wall that stood up against the Japanese war machine to hold them back. In 1931, Japan invaded and occupied the Chinese province of Manchuria. 6 years later, Japan mounted a full-scale invasion of China. Once World War II broke out, Japan became an ally of the Axis, and continued to attack and invade Chinese territory. Widely known as the Asian Holocaust, the Japanese are responsible for torturing and killing an estimated 20 million Chinese. During the war, Japan also invaded several other countries, including Malaya, Burma, Indochina, the Philippines, and the Dutch West Indies. In those invasions, the Japanese are estimated to have killed an additional 8.6 million people. After the war, a war crime tribunal was conducted, which was overseen by the U.S. Interestingly, only 28 Japanese military and government officials were tried at the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal in 1946. 3 died during the trial, while the other 25 were found guilty. Of those, 7 were hanged, and 18 were sentenced to prison terms, but were pardoned by 1958. In 1959, Japan's Emperor Hirohito ordered the names of those officials to a shrine in Tokyo, where Japanese leaders have traditionally memorialized their fallen fighters. Needless to say, the Chinese remain outraged, even at the time you are watching this video. Why did so many Indians die? India's contribution to defeating Nazism remains one of the little-known facts about World War II. Over 2.6 million Indian troops played a decisive role in the war, which led to over 87,000 deaths. Indian forces were dispatched to major war zones across the globe, and praised for their bravery. They fought fiercely with German tank divisions in Africa, and the Japanese in Burma took part in the invasion of Italy and played a significant role in the Middle East battles. Even British Prime Minister Winston Churchill acknowledged the unsurpassed bravery of Indian soldiers and officers. For India, it wasn't just the number of soldiers who fought in the war. The war effort took its toll on the civilian population as well. In 1943, a great famine broke out in Bengal, killing at least 3 million people. Most historians argue that the Bengal famine is a result of Churchill's decision to deprive Bengal of essential foods, to ensure enough grain reserves in Europe. Meanwhile, some argue that the war crisis forced Britain to act the way it did. Whatever the reason, the price Indians paid for World War II was enormous, yet little known by the world. On the other hand, victors of World War II were rewarded in one way or another. Germans were forced to pay various reparations to Jews, Allies, and other European countries, and individuals for the destruction they caused to them. The Americans initiated a famous economic recovery plan widely known as the Marshall Plan, to help European nations to rebuild their countries. For their contributions to the war, the US, Russia, France, UK, and China were awarded permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council with veto power. What does India get in return? Nothing. Fall of Singapore. Singapore, an island at the southern end of the Malay Peninsula, was considered a vital part of the British Empire. Given its military importance, in 1938, The military base in Singapore was completed at a great cost. The base was a part of the naval defense policy of Britain, to deter possible Japanese aggression, by providing a base for a fleet of the Royal Navy in the Far East. The base was stationed with around 100,000 military personnel, and equipped with the necessary military arsenal and other infrastructures. As per the top British military experts, the Singapore base was designed as a formidable military stronghold, and was thought to be invincible. However, the Japanese had a different viewpoint. From 8th of December 1941 onwards, the Japanese launched 11 relentless air raids on mainland Singapore. The Japanese onslaught took the British by surprise. The speed of the Japanese attack didn't allow the British forces time to regroup. That was the first time British forces encountered a full-scale attack by the Japanese, and it was a shocker. The British surrender, led by Lieutenant General Arthur Percival, is considered the largest British surrender in history. The Japanese took 100,000 prisoners in Singapore. It is estimated that around 9,000 of these men died building the Burma-Thailand Railway. After the war, Japan admitted that 5,000 had been murdered. However, as per the Chinese population in Singapore, the death toll should be as high as 50,000. The fall of Singapore was a humiliation for the British. The Japanese had been portrayed as useless soldiers only capable of fighting inferior military forces, like the Chinese. But, around 35,000 Japanese successfully defeated troops with a size much larger than them. The fall of Singapore was symbolic of the subsequent fall of the British Empire in the Far East. Many argue that the fall of Singapore was a testament to how any superpower could not adequately plan to fight a war on multiple fronts. Irrespective of its purpose, war does not reap any benefits for mankind. Arthur Neville Chamberlain, a former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, once said, "In war, whichever side may call itself the victor, there are no winners, but all are losers." As Benjamin Franklin famously said, "There never was a good war, or a bad peace." I will wrap up this video with the following quote made by an unknown author. "If war is the answer, we are asking the wrong question." Have a nice day. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing, which means a lot to me. I love to see your thoughts in the comment section.